All praises to the Most High Yahweh, Hashem, Yahweh Shai, double honors to the elders in Israel who well. Shalom to the hopeful elect, Lord willing. This video is edifying, just a quick hit, and I really want to get into patience, and it seems like we're going through the motions and the monotony of life. You just want this place to be over with, and you're just dealing with bullcrap. But you have to be patient. You have to wait on the Lord. We had we was at camp. I think it was about 2 weeks ago, where Jake came up smoking a cigarette, and he had no patience. He didn't want to wait on the Lord. To him it was weakness. He wanted to pick up arms and go against Esau himself, which is stupid. There's no wisdom in that. This is Ecclesiastes 3:1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, a time and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Right? So what time is this? It's not a time to kill. It's a time to plant. It's a time of waiting. When you plant something, you have to have the patience for it to reach fruition. And Jake wanna start plucking. And what happens if you pluck a seed and it's not ready? Your season is spoiled. You don't actually reap anything. So you go and attack Esau, you're not going to reap anything doing that. Because you're gonna attack him when the Lord hasn't given the go ahead. You want to do things of your own accord. And the thing is, the Lord has a plan. Regardless of what's good and bad, if you bear it out, you'll reach some dividend. But Jake hasn't got that patience, and a lot of the times is right before the Lord blesses you is when a lot of people actually fall short and make that mistake. Ultimately, it was never for them in the first place. But if you actually did believe in the Lord, you would reap the benefit. And one of the stories, there's multiple stories in the scriptures that show that, but one of the best examples is Job. The Lord jacked him up and he stayed patient, and in the end he was rewarded. Even with Yahushua, he got jacked up, in the end he was rewarded. He came back and he was taken up into the heavens. There's multiple stories of people showing their faith through patience, through suffering, and being ultimately rewarded for it. You don't want to curse the Lord and die, and then now you end up with nothing. Now you're gonna have your body and soul killed, destroyed. This is Proverbs 12 and 14 in the NLT. Wise words bring many benefits, and hard work brings rewards. And what is that hard work? Is the patience and the diligence, of the saints, of the brothers. Because you waiting on the Lord, you being patient, and not taking things into your own hands and not taking matters into your own hands is hard work, man. Because sometimes you be dealing with certain situations, they come up, and it makes you want to act, and it makes you want to act in haste. But the scriptures talk about, in times of trouble, not making haste. So you have to have that level of patience, and ultimately you're gonna be rewarded for it. You see that with brothers. Brothers may not be the richest, brothers may not have this and that, but you can see that their patience, their wisdom is always abounding. They improve themselves in a lot of ways. They're better men now in the truth, than they were in the world. Brothers aren't smoking weed, they're not doing degenerate behaviors, they're not dealing with other men's women. They're much better men than they were in the world, and they continue to improve as men. So that's the Lord rewarding them. But a lot of people think they only think of carnal rewards when they think of a reward. This is Romans 12 and 17. Recompense to no man evil for evil, provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as life in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him; if he thirst, give him drink, for in doing so thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Now, really, you know, when you're talking about that enemy, is twofold, because it's talking about Jake as well. But when you're dealing with Esau, you're supposed to show a level of kindness to him, and the Lord will see that. The Lord will see him using Esau to jack you up, and in that you've had a level of grace to show him mercy. What do you think the Lord's gonna do? He's gonna say, "Thou good and faithful servant, man," because I've made this man basically rule over you with a level of cruelty that anyone would want revenge for, and yet you've understood what it was and you've been patient. So when that time comes, the Lord is gonna give you the power and the will to do whatever you see fit to do to this man. He's gonna recompense him. You know, you can slowly see these things coming to pass. Coming to pass, Salakia. But you gotta have that patience. You can't take things, onto yourself and want to do things by yourself, because it's not gonna work. Because ultimately, the Lord is not with it. This is Hebrews 6:10. For Yahweh is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which ye have showed towards his name, in that ye have ministered to the saints and do minister. And that's what brothers do. Because ultimately the word is for the saints. It's not for the people of the world. They're not gonna hear it, and be filled with gladness when they hear this. They act, them demons inside them get riled up, man. When you tell somebody that they have to wait and be patient and wait on the Lord to come back, so that He can grant you the power to deal with these people, they're like, oh, what? It's some Christian stuff, but the Christians don't even talk about the Christians don't talk about revenge and recompensing, uh, the wicked for the wickedness that they've done. They just talk about loving your neighbor. There's no balance to their interpretation of the scriptures. And the brothers aren't interpreting the scriptures; they're reading it as they are. Because when you interpret something, you're putting your own spin on it. Brothers aren't interpreting things; they're just they're saying it where it is. It said, the land shall be cleansed by the blood of those that spill it. I mean, what does that mean? You ask a Christian that, they'll just they'll give you some word salad. It means that when you hurt people, it means that when you shed that blood it'd be some bullcrap that don't even make any sense. I mean, the scriptures are plain, man. But people like to dance around it. And when you look into the word saints, there's two strong definitions. This is hagios or hagios.
Strong's G40, hagios, hagios,
or hagias salakia, which goes most holy thing, a saint, right? Goes to venerate, to revere, especially the gods, parents, rare in secular authors, very frequent in the sacred writings, properly reverend, worthy of veneration. God on account is of incomparable majesty, equivalent to hence use of a thing which on account of some connection with God possess a certain distinction and claim to reverence as place sacred to God, which are not to be profaned. Right? So it talks about being sacred, physically pure, morally blameless, or religious, ceremonially consecrated, set apart, most holy, one thing, saint. And you going out and you being committing acts of violence on Esau, you're not going to be blameless before the Lord, because the Lord has told you to stand down. You are essentially a soldier in a war, and the Lord has told you to stand down. You ever watch the movies where you have a bunch of soldiers on the front line and they're getting massacred, and they're like, wait for it, and then when the enemy's vulnerable, then you attack, and you just watch a whole bunch of people die. But that was the game plan, and that was the only way to victory, because if you all attacked at once, you would have all been wiped out. But it had to happen that way. You had to exhaust the enemy, and then once the enemy was exhausted, you could exploit them. The Lord is a master tactician, man, and Jake don't wanna listen. You wanna listen to your own ideas of what warfare is.
Strong's H2623, Chassid, Chassid.
So Hasid. So Salakia. I'm not gonna say that. It goes into merciful, godly man, holy one. Uh, it goes into faithful, kind, godly, holy one, saint, pious, kind, godly. Let's look into that word pious. Devoutly religious, hopeful, sincere, right? And when you go into patience, it goes into the capacity to accept or tolerate delayed problems or suffering without becoming annoyed or anxious. And that brother didn't have any patience. You know, I'm not gonna clip it, but for brothers who watch Yahweh's Messengers, that you know, he was pretty much pissed off, man. He just walked off in a huff and puff. Like, oh, you niggas are weak. You know, you don't want to attack the white man. You know, that kind of psychology. Whereas if you really believed in that, you'd be in jail right now, man. If you really want to attack Esau, you would have been gone and attacked him, and you'd be in jail. So you a damn hypocrite anyway. You know, we're not being hypocritical. We're saying we're waiting on the Lord. You're saying you're about that action, but you clearly ain't if you walking around as a free man. Because if you was about that action, you go to the House of Parliaments and you'd be on that smoke that you say that you're on, that you're clearly not on actually. Revelation 14 and 12. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of Yahweh and the faith of Yahushai. And what's that faith? Being spat at, you know, having people cutting into you, pouring vinegar in your wounds, spitting at you, kicking you, punching you, splitting your skin, making you carry an abominable level of work, getting up when you're being kicked down, just suffering, being treated like dog dirt, and still suffering and knowing that the Lord has ultimately got your back, man. That's the faith of Yahweh Shai. That's all the things that he's been through. You know, that's all the stuff that we're going to have to go through. Because a servant isn't hiding his master, so we're gonna have to suffer for this. You know, but Jake don't want to suffer. You know, you wanna rule the kingdom and not and not have to suffer to get through it. And the thing is, to be a righteous leader, you have to know both sides of the coin. You have to know good and evil. So this is us learning that evil, so that we can be good, so that we can be, you know, the leaders that Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai wants us to be. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. You know, all praises to the Most High Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the elders of Israel who were well. Shalom to the elect. Shalom.